It's really interesting. I always find it fascinating in terms of what people expect spouses of political figures to say exactly.
Right.
Like, do they think that she's going to go on The View and disavow her
Right.
husband?
Right.
If so, they have a very sad view of marriage, I think. But I think she did a good job. She was obviously prepared. She was willing to have that debate with them. She didn't, say, like, I'm not going to talk about my husband's work. She was willing to go there, which I...
We didn't expect the loudest argument in America this week to come from a morning talk show. But here we are, watching Sunny Hostin set The View on fire with one line that practically split the internet in half. It wasn't politics, not exactly. It wasn't even celebrity gossip, not really. It was food, of all things. And the man now running the country's health policy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who Sunny called the least qualified health secretary in history. Those words dropped like a grenade, and you could see the shock ripple through the studio before the applause broke out. Joy Behar tried to soften it. Whoopi shifted in her seat, but Sunny was locked in. She wasn't just disagreeing, she was denouncing. And from that moment, everything about America's new food pyramid became a full-on culture war.
That's the point. Listen, we all have different views.
Yes.
And when you say, misinformation, disinformation, we could go back to COVID when...
He's connecting circumcision to autism.
May I finish?
Please.
When people were saying when you get the vaccine, you cannot transmit COVID. It will stop COVID. And that was disinformation, misinformation.
We were also still learning.
The internet moved faster than the broadcast delay. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Re-edited, remixed, memed to oblivion. People weren't arguing about vitamins or dairy anymore. They were arguing about loyalty. On one side, Sunny's fans saw her as the last person brave enough to call out what they called junk science in a suit. On the other, conservative commentators accused her of hating health itself. One popular post said she'd rather see people sick than admit RFK Jr. might be right about anything. And for a while, it looked like both sides might actually agree on one thing. The View had become the country's loudest battleground over who we should believe about food, medicine, and truth itself. Cheryl Hines didn't ask for a fight that morning. She came to plug her memoir, Sit Under the Bright Lights, maybe tell a sweet story about Curb Your Enthusiasm. Instead, she walked straight into a trap she couldn't have avoided even if she tried. Sunny pressed her from the start, polite but sharp. How could she defend her husband, a man once accused of spreading misinformation, now in charge of America's health? Hines tried to keep calm, explaining how complicated the decision had been, how Bobby and Trump found common goals.
The problem, respectfully, is that your husband is the least qualified Department of Health and Human Services head that we've had in history.
I think
that's a very dangerous.
Why is he less qualified than an economist?
I think
How is that
he
possible?
is less qualified.
He has spent his career.
But the second she tried to finish a sentence, Sunny cut her off. He's connecting circumcision to autism, Sunny shot back, and the crowd gasped. Hines blinked, stunned, and finally snapped, May I finish? That's when the audience clapped for her. For the first time, the energy in the room shifted. Like everyone realized, this wasn't about facts anymore. It was about who could survive being talked over on live television. We've all seen those viral moments on The View where disagreement turns into performance, but this one felt different. It wasn't gossip, it was war. You could almost feel the control room sweating. Whoopi's forced smile, Joy trying to crack a joke, Alyssa Farah Griffin jumping in with a line about Fauci's medical degree. It all added to the chaos. And somewhere between Sunny's fury and Hines's desperation, it stopped being a debate about qualifications and became a mirror of the whole country's exhaustion. No one was listening. Everyone was shouting. And at the center of it somehow was a conversation about butter, beef, and the new food pyramid that had literally been flipped upside down. Outside the studio, that pyramid became the lightning rod. A day earlier, RFK Jr. had stood at the White House podium, flanked by Dr. Oz and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, declaring the most significant reset of federal nutrition policy in history. He'd called for more protein, more full-fat dairy, real fats instead of seed oils, and a national retreat from processed foods. Eat real food, he said. It sounded simple, but it hit like rebellion. Overnight, headlines screamed about the upside-down pyramid, showing red meat, eggs, and cheese stacked proudly at the top, while grains slid to the bottom like the forgotten carbs of an old era. It was the nutrition equivalent of tearing down a monument, and the reaction was immediate. Some experts praised it as common sense. Others called it dangerous nostalgia.
On the heels of Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. scaling back the number of childhood vaccine recommendations in a move that CDC staff said blindsided them, he's now turning the food pyramid of nutrition guidelines upside down. And CDC official Dr. Oz claims it's happy hour in America.
But then came the clip that changed everything. Dr. Oz, now a government official, half joking at the briefing. There is adult beverage on these guidelines, but the implication is don't have it for breakfast. That line went viral in minutes. It was meant to lighten the tone, but instead it turned the press conference into a meme factory. Within hours, Happy Hour in America was trending alongside War on Sugar. Suddenly, the entire health department looked less like a policy team and more like a reality show cast. Every line was dissected, every soundbite weaponized. Supporters said Oz was humanizing health. Critics said he was trivializing it. And somehow, the same people arguing over macronutrients were now calling each other fascists on X. Sunny Hostin, meanwhile, doubled down. On Friday's episode, she went even further. Not just questioning Kennedy's qualifications, but bringing up his brainworm. An old medical story resurfaced by the New York Times years ago. "I think maybe it's affecting the way that he thinks," she said, completely expressionless. You could almost hear the producer's hearts drop. She wasn't joking, and the panel froze. Then, as if to lighten the tension, Joy Behar shouted to the audience, "You get salmonella, and you get salmonella," parodying Oprah. But it didn't help. The laughter was awkward. Viewers online called it cruel. And within minutes, Kennedy's defenders clipped it, labeling Sunny a bully targeting a man's medical history. That's when things truly spiraled. By Saturday morning, conservative outlets were running headlines about The View's witch hunt. One commentator went viral for saying, "Sunny Hostin's rage at RFK Jr. isn't about science, it's about control." Another took it further, comparing her reaction to religious panic, claiming she couldn't handle a healthy man rewriting the government's old food commandments. The phrasing was ugly, but it stuck. People began circulating side-by-side images. Kennedy shirtless on a paddleboard, and the previous administration's visibly overweight health secretary, arguing it was proof that the outrage wasn't about health at all. It was about hate. A few of the loudest voices said bluntly, "They just can't stand that he looks healthier than they do."
Up on this, 70% of the U.S. food supply is made from ultra-processed food.
Yes.
70%. And like you were saying, it's very expensive to eat well. It's very expensive to eat steak.
That's true. Yeah.
Look at the price of beef. It's very expensive to eat
So I'm
lean
suspicious
protein.
of this consumption. Maybe the
They're right on that one.
That's when the debate stopped being about nutrition entirely and turned into a tribal feud. Fans on both sides began digging up photos, comparing waistlines, mocking the word healthy itself. Someone edited together clips of The View's panel eating pastries while Kennedy lifted weights in slow motion. It was petty, mean, and perfectly viral. Within hours, the hashtag RippedFKJr. was born, and suddenly Kennedy wasn't just a health secretary. He was the face of a new, weirdly macho anti-establishment wellness movement. Eat real food became a political slogan, and every critic who mocked it only made it trend faster. Meanwhile, the people who actually worked on the guidelines were panicking. The White House fact sheet was meant to be boring. Fewer processed foods, less added sugar, more protein, more fiber. Instead, it turned into a culture war bonfire. The American Heart Association issued a cautious statement, applauding the emphasis on fruits and vegetables, but warning about excess saturated fat. Experts like Marion Nestle called the whole thing scientifically weak. But those voices were drowned out by the noise, the shouting, the memes, the outrage. By Sunday night, even neutral dietitians were getting harassed online, accused of lying about seed oils for big pharma. It was surreal. The actual science had evaporated, replaced by talking points and loyalty tests. Inside ABC, things weren't calm either. Sources say executives met late Friday to discuss the fallout. Some worried that Sunny's least qualified line had crossed into defamation territory. Others reportedly wanted to lean into the drama because, let's be honest, the ratings had spiked. Every outlet was replaying that clip. People who hadn't watched The View in years were suddenly tuning in. "She might have just saved daytime TV," one insider said, "but she might have ended her career doing it." Meanwhile, Sunny's own fans were torn, some defending her right to speak freely, others saying she'd gone too far by mocking Kennedy's health. It was the kind of moment that feels small until you realize it's going to define someone's reputation forever. The irony is, the policy she was rejecting, the one she said she can't trust, wasn't even that radical. For the first time, the government had officially told Americans to avoid ultra-processed food. The CDC's own data said over half the country's calories come from it. The guidelines banned sweetened drinks, capped added sugars at 10 grams per meal, and told people to eat more fermented foods for gut health. But none of that mattered once Kennedy's name was attached. Sunny's outrage and the echo chamber that followed turned "eat less junk" into a partisan statement. Suddenly, choosing whole milk over skim was political. Ordering a steak was taking sides. It was absurd, but we've seen it happen before.
And The View is a particularly weird place to do a cancellation.
It's called The View?
It's called The View. It's not called The Facts.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting that it's called, I mean, I don't think they meant this when Barbara Walters invented it a long time ago, but it's The View.
Well,
that's the problem in America.
But
there is one view,
right, and
one
that's clearly
true opinion, and everybody else can go sit in the...
The thing about moments like this, when celebrity, science, and politics collide, is that everyone ends up revealing more than they mean to. Hostin's anger wasn't just about Kennedy. It was about her own loss of faith in institutions she used to defend. When she said, I can't listen to any of the guidelines now. It landed like confession. A former government lawyer admitting she no longer trusts the system she once helped build. That hit people differently. Some called it brave honesty, others saw hypocrisy. But either way, it was raw. And that rawness is why the story refuses to fade. By Monday morning, the White House tried to shift attention back to the actual nutrition facts. Kennedy appeared on CBS, calm and rehearsed, repeating his new mantra, "Eat real food." He called it a science-driven reset, insisting the pyramid had been upside down before. But even as he spoke, the camera shots of steak and butter circulating online told a different story, one of rebellion, of a man daring to challenge decades of low-fat orthodoxy. Supporters saw a revolution. Critics saw a carnival. And in between, millions of Americans were left wondering whether they should trust the government's guidelines or just trust their instincts. By the time Dr. Oz chimed in again, casually defending adult beverages as a social lubricant, the spectacle was complete. It wasn't about data anymore. It was entertainment, pure and simple. Food had become politics, politics had become personality, and personality had become clickbait. Sunny Hostin may have started the week as a TV host with strong opinions, but by the weekend, she was the face of a bigger story, a cultural meltdown over who's allowed to speak truth about health. And as we watched the hashtags multiply and the backlash mutate, one thing became clear. This wasn't ending anytime soon, because what started as a talk show argument was now something much larger, something that was about to get even uglier.
He has spent his career studying toxins, studying people's health, fighting for one guy who was using Roundup for his job.
He has also spread a lot of misinformation, a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. And I think it's just a very dangerous thing. I say it with...
And maybe that's the strangest part. This was never really about steak or sugar. The deeper we look, the more it feels like a national Rorschach test, disguised as a menu. People aren't arguing about protein anymore. They're arguing about who's allowed to say the word healthy. The louder the fight gets, the clearer the pattern becomes. Kennedy says, "Eat real food," and his followers treat it like gospel. Sunny Hostin rolls her eyes, and half the country cheers her on for defiance alone. It's not about the science on the plate, it's about the politics behind the fork. Somewhere along the line, nutrition became a loyalty oath, and every bite started carrying a side. Insiders close to The View say producers saw the meltdown coming the moment RFK Jr. was confirmed for the cabinet. They claim Sunny had been warning staff she wouldn't play nice with disinformation, but no one expected the moment to explode this fast. The irony? A few members of the audience that day reportedly applauded Kennedy's reforms before realizing whose policy they were clapping for. One former producer told us, "You could see the confusion. They liked what they heard until they heard the name. That's the new American reflex, isn't it? We don't ask if something makes sense. We ask who said it first." Not long after that episode aired, the focus shifted from Sunny's outrage to her motives. Online detectives began connecting dots. Sponsorships, social media spikes, new book promotions, suggesting that Sunny's explosion on air wasn't entirely spontaneous. Some of her followers openly wondered whether the outrage was just another form of branding, another way to stay viral in a talk show market built on friction. Her critics pointed out that every time she goes off, her clips dominate feeds for days, and viewership climbs. It's a cynical theory, but one that gained traction fast. Because in an era when outrage equals engagement, sincerity is almost impossible to prove. We watched as the narrative warped overnight. Suddenly, Sunny wasn't just a host defending her beliefs. She was being painted as a savvy opportunist who knew exactly how to turn a national debate into a personal spotlight. Threads dissected her timing, claiming she'd been building up to the meltdown right as her memoir sales were stalling. Others pulled up past controversies, arguing that this was part of a pattern. Moral stands that somehow aligned perfectly with her promotional calendar. Whether fair or not, the suspicion stuck. The internet loves a villain, and it's easier to accuse hypocrisy than to imagine genuine frustration. By the weekend, what started as a debate over nutrition had morphed into a referendum on authenticity. Commenters joked that Sunny was cashing in on clean eating, while influencers accused her of caring more about clicks than causes. Even some longtime fans admitted they felt uneasy watching her transformation from commentator to main character. It became a story within the story. Proof, maybe, that in modern fame, even conviction is currency. Every outburst, every eye roll, every trending clip can be measured in views, and every controversy becomes a paycheck. And in that equation, sincerity doesn't always stand a chance.
Conservative, I don't want politicians in D.C. telling me what to eat. I want my
Especially when they don't
doctor
know what you're
and my
doing.
nutritionist to tell me to. It's kind of a new thing in this Trump era that that's even the role of the federal government. We used to hit Democrats for being like a little too encroachy into our lives about our diet and what we're putting into
But
our
don't they
bodies.
always talk about how people who don't have money eat a lot of processed food,
Well,
a lot of junk
that's
food?
expensive.
But then,
We
wait a
subsidize
second.
that as a country.
But they are now canceling SNAP benefits.
Meanwhile, Kennedy's camp has leaned into the chaos. Aides have quietly circulated talking points comparing the backlash to political bulimia, accusing critics of binging on outrage and purging any idea that comes from the other side. They're betting the meme will do what reason can't, make their enemies look absurd. And it's working. We've seen influencers post Trump says drink water videos, mocking the idea that the left would rather dehydrate than agree with the right. It's a cruel joke, but it's hitting a nerve. Kennedy's defenders keep saying that this is proof of something bigger. Not that they're right about food, but that America is starving for agreement and choking on pride. Even Dr. Oz seems to be leaning into the circus, hinting that the real war isn't against sugar or seed oil, but against stubbornness itself. He told one reporter that food brings people together, a line meant to sound wholesome, but delivered with just enough irony to know he was watching the same madness we all are. The pundits call it polarization. The public calls it exhaustion. What used to be science now feels like sport, whose side can clap louder, whose diet looks more patriotic. And the more absurd it gets, the more people tune in, like they're watching a national breakdown in slow motion. But here's the whisper floating through every newsroom right now. This might only be the start. If the food pyramid can become a political weapon, what's next? Exercise guidelines, vitamins, even sleep advice could turn partisan before the year's out. We've crossed a strange line where every rule meant to make us better turns into another excuse to fight. So maybe the real scandal isn't that RFK Jr. flipped the pyramid. It's that we flipped our ability to listen. What do you think? Are we watching a health revolution or just another round of chaos in disguise? Drop your take in the comments because this story isn't cooling down anytime soon. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and maybe, just maybe, read the label before you pick a side.